Hello, everyone, and welcome to this workshop series. My name is Siddharth Sharat Kumar, or just Sid if that's easier to pronounce, and I'm going to be your host and presenter for this workshop series. Before we even get down to anything, I want to make sure everything is okay with the audio and with the shared screen. So if you could quickly take a moment on the live chat or on the hand raise option on the GoToWebinar panel to let me know everything is okay, we can get started. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've already got a few messages. Thank you all for confirming. Thank you all for joining in for this session. I know these are obviously very unusual times, and we really appreciate everyone joining us today, taking time off to engage with us for this workshop series. Now, I work as a product evangelist for ManageEngine Log 360, and especially in the last 2 years, I've completely been on the road, literally jumping across from country to country to speak at ManageEngine's seminars and user conferences. So under ideal circumstances, I'm sure we would have gotten to meet each other at one of our seminars. That said and done, we are trying to do more online events to keep our customers and prospects engaged. And I hope that this workshop series is beneficial for you. Of course, we might not get the same feel of a live event. It goes without saying, but I still hope we can engage in a meaningful discussion virtually. And I hope that you all get the benefit for attending this workshop series over these next 3 days. I hope everyone is safe and sound. I'm guessing today, given the time zone that we are doing this particular workshop for, I'm guessing most of you today are joining in from Europe, from Africa, from the Americas. So stay safe, everyone, and hopefully things get better sooner rather than later. So this workshop series is going to be a 3-part workshop series with the objective of helping you leverage Log 360 to the fullest, right? So we do a lot of hands-on training wherein we go step by step into configuring the solution. But we've decided this time for this workshop series to make it somewhere between a product training and also a knowledge share. Right. So the objective is really to talk about every capability that we have in the solution, and sort of show you what's where in the product so that you can then, try to do a demo or try to deploy it on your own to see if it meets your requirements. So what we're going to do is over these next 3 days, give you a walkthrough of the entire feature set of the solution. We'll look at some use cases to illustrate our points. I'll give you some tips and tricks that you can take back and implement, irrespective of whether you're using ManageEngine or not. And also talk about some of the latest features and enhancements that we've worked on, and some of the new add-ons that we've brought about in recent months. So, like I said, for the purpose, for the benefit of everyone, I'm going to keep the presentation more general so that we strike that right balance between a product session and a knowledge share. But I will take questions on the live chat at the end of each workshop. We'll try to do a live Q&A where I can answer the questions out loud for the benefit of everyone. Or we can do, but even if we are not able to do that, you can be rest assured I'll answer the questions on the live chat itself at the end. Right, so keep your questions coming in. I'll make a compilation of all of them and see to it that they're answered at the end of the session. Okay, so today's workshop, we are going to be looking at why SIEM, why do we need a SIEM, and exactly how Log 360 fulfills those requirements of a SIEM solution. And then I'm going to get you started off with thinking about what are the devices and log sources that you need to add for monitoring. How would you go about doing that in Log 360? Then once you add the devices for monitoring, how are you going to access the data and run search queries to pull out information that you need? And then look at how can we generate audit reports to periodically track and review events of interest. and finally give you examples of must-have audit reports, right? So irrespective of what SIM solution you're using, this might be a useful thing for you to take back and implement in your organizations. So I also just want to give a quick disclaimer since I'm doing this workshop from home. I do have a limited setup in terms of the live environment, so I'm going to be toggling between a couple of demos. So bear with me on that. And also, of course, I hope I hope the internet does not bail on us. We obviously have limited network infrastructure compared to our office space, but hopefully it shouldn't be a problem, right? In any case, we've already done the same workshop for another time zone. So I'll see to it that the recordings are sent to everyone who registered for the session in any case. Okay, so let's get started with the session. So Log360 is ManageEngine's SIM solution. Some say SIEM, some say SIM. It's ManageEngine's one of ManageEngine's flagship solutions, and it's been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant now for 4 years. In fact, the latest report came out just a couple of months ago. So if you haven't seen it already, you can access that and get your hands on the latest details. So Log360 is an integrated SIM, which means it has multiple security monitoring tools that have been unified into one single interface. I say it has many tools, but I'm going to focus only on two of them. One is AD Audit Plus, and the other is Event Log Analyzer. So AD Audit Plus is a real-time Active Directory auditing tool, which helps you track, detect, and mitigate insider threats. And Event Log Analyzer is a general log management tool which helps you safeguard your network against external attacks, right? So we're talking about insider threats and external threats, and AD Audit Plus gives you that user context by monitoring your Active Directory, while Event Log Analyzer looks at some of your other servers, applications, and network equipment, and is going to monitor those parts of your infrastructure. And with the capability of both these tools, you get Log360, which is our integrated SIEM solution. Now, on top of Log360 sits Log360 UEBA, which is our user and entity behavior analytics component. Log360 UEBA helps you augment the capabilities of Log360 by bringing in an element of machine learning and AI to really take your analytics to the next level, right? So Log360 UBA, as you probably guessed, will work on the data collected by Log360, or to be more precise, it works on the data collected by AD Audit Plus and Event Log Analyzer. And this is also something that we're going to look into in the workshop series. This will be in the third part on Thursday, when we dive deep into some of these more advanced capabilities. But today we're going to focus mostly on a little bit of AD Audit Plus to show you some use cases and also some basic configurations and what you need to be considering really while deploying a SIM solution. And for that, I'm going to be looking at Event Log Analyzer. Right. So this is what we've got from ManageEngine. But why do we need this, right? Why, you might be rightly wondering, why do we need something like this when we already have various other security solutions? You may have invested in next-gen antivirus. You might have got, the latest IDS, IPS systems. You may have great access controls. You may have, patching and unified endpoint management. But why do you really need a SIM? Well, to answer that, obviously, no preventive solution is 100% perfect. No matter what, there are going to be some security loopholes in your network, and you need a SIM to be able to detect when something goes wrong in your network. Right? That is going to be an important theme throughout this workshop series. We are essentially trying to identify when something slips through the preventive measures and when something suspicious or anomalous or basically something that might require an investigation, right? We're going to use the term security event of interest. Anytime something like that happens, we want to be able to detect it. And I can think of no better example than this one. Imagine Ron is an end user from the sales team in your organization, and Ron is added to the domain admins group in Active Directory. Now, would this be a problem? Of course it would, because this is a violation of your security policy, right? Ron, maybe his account was compromised and the attacker has elevated their privileges to domain admins. And once they do that, it's just a matter of going to your Active Directory, right-clicking a GPO and clicking delete, right? So let's not even get into the disastrous consequences of something like that. Of course, we don't even need to think about what kind of attack it is, right? It could even be that Ron is a malicious insider who's gained control and has promoted himself to domain admin. Um, this let's not even think of what the attack was, but the fact that Ron is added to domain admins, that is an issue, right? The fact that Ron has been added to domain admins is an issue, is a security event of interest, and is something that you need to be notified for so that you can investigate and see what happens. And if your answer to the question, can you detect such an event in your network, is no, well, that means you need to ramp up your security monitoring, because such an event, it's quite basic. It's nothing too complicated. It's a single event. Ron, a user who's being moved who's being moved to a different security group in Active Directory. One single event, you need a real-time notification for something like that. And what a security monitoring tool can do for you, let me just get out of the presentation for a moment and jump into AD Audit Plus. So what a security monitoring tool can do for you is track such an event and help you visualize and know that this has happened in your network. It's going to maintain what we call an audit trail of such events happening in your network, and it is going to report on it and alert about such events. Let's not even get into alerting because we'll dive into that tomorrow. But here we have what we call security reports. And for example, I have a report here that says recently modified groups. I would be able to see, because of a security monitoring tool, that these are the top groups that have been modified in my Active Directory. This is, of course, for a given time period of 30 days. And I can get the details at a in-depth level on exactly what these changes were. So I'm talking about which was the group, which was who did it, when did it happen, where, which domain controller, and so on. So if you, I'm not going to, we'll come back into reporting over the course of the session, but what you can see here, for example, even if you're completely new to this, don't worry about it. You can see here, domain admins has been modified at a specific time. A member was added to a security enabled global group, and this is something that is a cause for concern, obviously, right? So you have a specific caller username which has made this change, and that is being tracked by the security monitoring tool, right? So we'll get into reports, like I said, in a bit, but you can see that it's essentially being tracked, right? It's being audited. You have the audit trail of what is going on, and it's all neatly documented for any investigation or mitigation that you need to do. I'll also just quickly touch upon that it's not just about reporting that we're going to be interested in, but it's also alerting. So you can see here, for example, we have something here, recent alerts, right? So it says here, logon activity was done by AD manager, which is a user, within 6 to 7 a.m., which deviates from user's normal logon activity hours, right? So this user normally logs in between 7 a.m. to 1 a.m., but is doing something at a time they normally do not log on or do things, right? Not to say that this is an attack, which is why you can see it's in orange. It's not really an attack. But this is to say that such events will be tracked by a security monitoring tool. That is the purpose, right? That is why we need a security monitoring tool. We need to be able to track when suspicious events happen in the network, and we need to have the audit trail. So what we're essentially trying to do is just 3 steps. I don't really think that, I mean, SIM is of course a pretty big domain. It's a $2 billion market according to Gartner estimates. But what I'm trying to say is this is all we are trying to do at a high level. We have a lot of data. We're going to apply analytics on that data so that we can gain insights and take action, right? So the term that you'll hear a lot is actionable intelligence. We have data, we apply analytics on the data so that we gain actionable insights that allows us, in this case, to respond to a security threat. And so you have a lot of data generated by the network. By applying analytics on the data, you're able to identify a needle in the haystack, and you're able to see things that you might have missed otherwise. And as a result of that, you can then take action, which in this case would be investigating and mitigating a security incident. So how do we do it with Log 360? It's not too different from a SIM solution, so it's not going to be a surprise per se. But essentially what we're trying to do is define an audit policy. An audit policy is basically a logging policy, more known as a logging policy more generally. And a logging policy is going to tell a particular system what events it needs to generate log entries for. Right? So you can go to various systems and applications, go to the GUI, and you will have an ability to configure a logging policy so that events that you want to track, it could be log-on events, it could be object access events, it could be process tracking, it could be anything. You can define and choose what events the system needs to generate log entries for. Once you've done that, you will then aggregate all of these logs into a central location. That is where your SIM comes into the picture. Right? You've defined logs, and logs are being generated on various different systems. So you might have a Windows security log, you might have a database audit log, you may have sys logs coming in from a firewall. And all of these are going to be collected centrally by your SIM solution. Your SIM solution is then going to run reports to help you visualize the data. It is going to also archive all of the data, which means securely storing the data so that you can conduct a forensic investigation at a later point if you need. Archiving is also, of course, crucial for various IT compliance regulations and audits. Now, in addition to doing that, as the logs are being collected, your SIM solution is going to correlate all of these data points. It's going to say, oh, something happened on the firewall. And right after that, something happened on your SQL. Now, right after that, something happened on a VPN, maybe. So it's able to correlate these different events, identify things that might be suspicious, throw up an alert and say, hey, this has happened. You need to go and investigate. And it's also going to assist you in responding to the security incident. And that's something we look at, again, in the later stages of the workshop. So this is, just, in a sense, what we're trying to do, right? What you have to do before deploying a SIM, of course, is that defining of logging policy. That is something that you need to spend a little bit of time on to understand how the logging policies work on different different applications and systems in your infrastructure, and then understand what kind of events might be important for you. And once you do that and you have a good SIM solution, it sort of takes over and does the heavy duty analytics for you, right? So it sort of works on an autopilot. I'm not saying that you don't need to do anything and the SIM solution just magically works, but I'm saying it's going to start doing a lot of things automatically, and you can just sit and observe and then identify. You can basically sit at your desk and do your normal work. And if something bad happens, your SIEM is going to raise an alarm. So you will be able to sit. It's of course it's still reactive in the sense that once it happens is when you respond, but you're trying to be as proactive as possible, right? Like you don't wait for something extremely bad to happen and then you realize it a year or 6 months later, but maybe a few hours or even a day after an incident happens still goes a long way. Okay, so you might rightly be thinking, what are my log sources? What are my log sources that I need to add to my SIEM solution? Now, what you see here is, of course, a pretty big list, although it's not an exhaustive list. But I would say for people who are new to SIEM, deploying one for the first time, focus on your most important sources, right? It doesn't make sense to just immediately on day one, bring in data from everything that you have in your infrastructure and really make this, and then you're not going to see results, and then you're going to think that the solution doesn't work, right? So what I prefer to recommend to clients is doing a staged deployment, wherein, on the day you deploy your SIEM, you focus on maybe one or two important log sources, bring in that data, be satisfied with what's being tracked, reports and alerts that are being generated, then go look at the next set of log sources that you want, and then so on, right? And each time adding more algorithms and more analytics on the data. So to start off with, I would say that you can look at your domain controllers, your network equipment. This could be your firewalls, routers, switches, IDS, IPS that may be built in, and your systems that store sensitive data. So that could be like your database applications. You could have file servers, it could be a net app, it could be anything. Basically a system that stores sensitive data. So start with that, focus on these domain controller. Just look at, let me get my domain controller logs in. Let me get my maybe database and file server logs in and get my firewall logs in. It's a good starting point. You'll start seeing results on day one with Log360, with those kind of sources. Then look at, okay, what are my other servers that I can bring in? What are my other member servers? Do I have any Linux, Unix boxes that need monitoring? Then you say, oh, maybe I can look at my web applications. Then you move on to, okay, I have some cloud infrastructure. I'm on Azure, or I have an Office 365. So bring in that data. And then look at, oh, I have other security solutions and network tools. You might have, for example, a threat solution like a semantic endpoint protection or a vulnerability scanner or something like that. And you can look at bringing that data finally. So that is my recommendation, to be progressively deploying a SIEM solution. You don't want to get overwhelmed by, too much data, and you don't, you just, it becomes very hard to manage on day one. Then you don't know what to prioritize, basically, right? So it's important to keep. I read a lot of reports by various vendors, and a lot of them say that SIEM solutions a very small percentage of SIEM solutions end up being successfully deployed. Right? A lot of people buy a SIEM solution, but in terms of actually successfully deploying and leveraging its benefits, it's a lot far fewer organizations than you would think. And that's something even I've seen in the last few years, that when I go for events, and maybe as someone who works in a product company, I'm very excited to showcase solutions. But some people say, I've had SIEM solutions in the past, but it never really gave us what we wanted. And my gut feeling is that it's sometimes to do with that during the deployment, you maybe take up too much in one go. Whereas I'd say, in a case of Log360, just get in AD Audit Plus, get in your domain controller logs, be satisfied with that, then look at your, firewalls, your other critical servers, systems that store sensitive data, and so on. So how do we get started with Log360? I said the first step would be to configure logging. This is something, like I said, you have to configure on the GUI of your target systems and applications. Remember that logging is not enabled by default, which means this is something that you have to configure. And also that logging is resource intensive, which means it's not something that you say, oh, I just track everything. It's going to, if you do that and you don't have a strong network and bandwidth, it's going to do more harm than good. But instead, what is really advisable is to look at defining a granular audit policy, right? Granular audit policy means that you can choose exactly what subcategories of events you want to track. So if any of you have worked on a Windows infrastructure, you may have dealt with the Windows group policy editor, right? So that has something called the advanced audit policy configuration. And the advanced audit policy configuration breaks down each audit category into various subcategories. So you might have, for example, log-on events, and there might be many subcategories of log-on events that you can choose from. And if you go to maybe something like object access auditing, there would be some 13 subcategories, which will tell you exactly what you can pick and choose, right? You might not want the entire set of events tracked, but maybe you want 6 or 7 out of the 13, right? So that way your bandwidth is not doesn't get sucked up, and you also ensure that the logs are coming in at an ideal flow into your SIEM, so that the SIEM solution doesn't get overwhelmed. Sometimes if you have too much data and most of the data is junk, the analytics isn't going to be very effective. In fact, I would say that already to begin with, a SIEM solution is mostly dealing with most of the data that comes in is not going to be of consequence, and only very few events are what you're really interested in. On top of that, if you just bring in too much data, then you're really making the problem harder, right? So this is something that I think, again, can become a bottleneck in terms of getting results from the deployment. So make sure that you have taken some time to think about the logging policies. If you have to do a call or some document reading from those vendors, so you might be using a specific maker of a firewall, you can look at their help documentation to see exactly how their logging policy works. It's not too complicated, but it might just require a little bit of time to make sure you're truly on top of this. Okay, so now you've done that, hopefully, and that is out of the way. Next, you come to Log 360 to actually start adding your devices for monitoring and to start seeing some results, right? So how we have categorized our logs sources, AD Audit Plus, I'm going to put that aside for now, because AD Audit Plus is basically your domain controllers, so it's fairly straightforward. But Event Log Analyzer, because it deals with a much larger scope of systems and applications, we have categorized the logs into 3 different types. These are your Windows logs, your sys logs, and your application logs. So Windows logs is quite straightforward. Windows logs are your Windows systems. Sys logs would be your Linux, Unix machines, as well as your network equipment, like your firewalls, routers, switches, IDS, IPS. Others is, okay, the small other category for things like your IBM AS400 machines, and so on. Then you've got application sources, which could be like your SQL, IAS, your database and web server applications. These are extremely crucial. And you can also, so these are things that Event Log Analyzer can automatically discover, right? So once you give your domain credentials and your network credentials, Event Log Analyzer will be able to identify these devices that are present and allow you to easily add them for monitoring. I'll just show you that in a minute. In addition to that, you have the option of importing logs. right? Importing logs means that you can say do a one-time import, or you can periodically import log files from a specific location for analysis. Additionally, we have a few other data sources, some other applications like your terminal servers and printer servers. You could have custom applications, meaning these are some in-house tools that you may be using that are of concern to you. You could have file integrity monitoring sources, your files and folders as data sources, and threat solutions, right? So something like a Symantec or a FireEye, and vulnerability scanners, right? So these is broadly speaking, these are all the things that you would look at. Let's see how that would look like in Event Log Analyzer. So just quickly logging into our demo setup. The first thing you will see, of course, would be the dashboard. And the dashboard gives you at first glance a quick overview of everything that's happening in your network. Right? You get to see the total number of events, trends in those events, the devices that are generating most events, the categories of events, and so on. And it's a dynamic dashboard that updates, and it's also customizable. Okay, but to get this, to actually get these charts and numbers, you need to add your devices, right? So to do that, you go to the settings section of the solution. You will go to the manage devices under settings. And here is where you'll be able to configure all of the device types that I just talked about. So you've got Windows devices, right? Quite straightforward. This will all be automatically discovered. So you can configure a domain and a work group, right? And once you add a new domain and give the credentials, the product will be able to scan and be able to identify all your domain and workgroup devices, and you can easily add them for monitoring, after which you will see all the devices that you've added, an overview of their status and what monitoring interval you've set. And this would be your interface for selecting devices, enabling things, disabling devices, changing the monitoring interval, deleting them, and so on. Next, you've got syslog devices. So syslog devices, like I said, are your Linux, Unix machines and your network equipment, like your firewalls, routers, switches, IDS, IPS. Here you will be able to add the devices by discovering them based on the IP address or range or the CIDR range. Once you do that and add them, just as the Windows devices, you will be able to see, what the devices are and what the status is. Then you've got other devices. Here we have we've called all of this as devices, and then we move on to applications. Right? So we've just the lingo that we use is devices and applications. So in other devices, you will be able to see ESXi and IBM ES400, right? So you can add these right here. Next, how you add them. Now, these devices use agentless mechanisms to get the data from the target machine. So there are various protocols that we employ to pull the data and receive it. And you have the option of deploying agents as well, right? I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritties of agents, but maybe in certain cases you need to deploy an agent because the machine is in a demilitarized zone in your network. So agents can also be used. So for devices, yeah, those are two ways you can get the logs. And you have the option of importing log data, like I said, right? So you can import logs by pointing to a local shared or remote path or from the internet, from the cloud. And you can either do a one-time import for analysis, or you can do a periodic import wherein you say every day or every hour the logs need to be ingested. So you point to the file, the path where the logs are being written, and the data from the files will be ingested. Now, then you've got application sources. So these could be your SQL, your IAS, and other application sources, like your Oracle, printer servers, terminal servers, and also some other manage engine applications, right? So you might have some other manage engine solutions from which you want to bring in the logs. So those would be your applications. Then you've got file integrity monitoring for which you've got Linux for now. So this would, if you want Windows, you'd actually have to go to AD Audit Plus as per the latest builds. We've just made that distinction to keep only the Linux file integrity monitoring within Event Log Analyzer. Then we've got threat sources. So threat sources could be your Symantec, FireEye. You can add those here, Malwarebytes, and McAfee, and so on. Then you've got threat management has to do with our threat intelligence module. We'll talk about that in the next parts of the workshop series. You've got vulnerability data, so you might want to bring in details about vulnerabilities in your network from your devices like a Nessus or a Qualys and so on. So you can import that vulnerability data, so that you can get in this information into the solution as well. And this particularly becomes useful for using it as part of your correlation rules for associating vulnerabilities with other events happening in the network. And okay, then you've got vCenter as well, which is if you have that requirement, you can always use it. So this is the basic data sources that we've got. And obviously, like I said, you want to prioritize your network equipment, which would be your syslog devices in this case, and some of your other applications like databases and files that store sensitive data. And so that would be a good starting point. Next up, once you have once you have configured an audit policy and added the devices for monitoring, the logs will start getting collected. Once you start receiving the logs, you can pull out any information that you need very easily using the search engine. The search engine is basically this elastic search database, which you can use to type out queries and pull out information that you may need in a given context. So what you can do here, let me quickly show you the search. So you can go to the search tab in Event Log Analyzer. Here you'll have the option of typing out queries. So you can choose a device. If you want to search through logs on a specific device, you can choose what type of logs that you want to look at. You can give a time period and type out a query to pull out specific information. Let's quickly see how that would look like. So what this would look like is you've got a huge data pool that you've collected. So, I mean, this is of course a small demo setup and we still have around close to 300,000 events. And all of this is a lot of data, of course, and might not make much sense because it's just too much to read through. But you might want to pull out specific information out of all of this. Right? For example, you may be concerned about a specific event ID. So you can do one of two things. You can either go to the search query tab and type out something like event ID equals, sorry about that, event ID equals and some event ID to check if you have that, right? I don't know if this is going to be there. Let's look at event ID 1100. So, okay, this is not there, which is not a problem because what you can do to see what event IDs you have in the first place is go to the log fields, click on the event ID field that you see right here, and then click on a specific event, right? So you can do it this way and you can pull out information. So you can see all the event IDs 4624 were highlighted. I think the reason why the event ID didn't show up when I typed the query was because you need to put the space between event and ID, right? So but that's also goes to show why sometimes it's not so convenient to type out search queries unless you're very familiar with doing that. So instead, you can leverage the click-based search, which really makes your work a lot easier. You can simply click on a specific field like event ID, click, or let me just clear this query and just redo that. You can very easily pull out information, right? By just clicking, you can look at maybe a source IP, and then you want to just see information from a specific IP address. You can pull that out. You can go ahead and say, no, I want to look at specific event IDs. So you can do that as well, as I showed you earlier. And this is how you would do a security investigation, right? So you have a lot of data that you need to search through, and using these different log fields, by clicking on them, you can see what you have in your data pool and pull out information that you need for a specific context, right? That is why search is so important. You need to be able to get information you need at your fingertips in just a matter of a few clicks. And once you get specific data from your search queries, you can save the search results as a report. So this might be very important in the context of an IT audit. It could be for an internal or external audit. You'll be able to save this, right? This is what that fundamental idea of log management is all about. We are maintaining an audit trail, and then if we need to, we are going to refer the audit trail, run queries, and pull out data and file these reports for compliance or for some internal policy that you may have. Okay, so what events should we track, right? What events should we track? That is a very important question, and this is also going to be important when you decide your logging policy. So what events you should track is events that could be part of attack kill chains, right? So remember how I said in the beginning that the whole purpose of a SIEM is to detect when something goes bad in your network. So when an attack happens, various kinds of security events may be part of what we call the kill chain, and you have to track events that could constitute a particular kill chain, right? So for example, I've listed a few here. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but for example, you take something like log on, log off events. Every attack is going to have some log on as part of its kill chain. Someone has to log on somewhere, either for themselves to carry out an attack or for their account to be compromised, right? So that is a good starting point. You need to have tracking for log on, log off events. Then Active Directory changes. These are things you may see in attacks. You might see changes made to users, computers, groups, OUs, GPOs as part of the attack. You might have network configuration changes, right? So you might have network configuration changes. Maybe someone changes a firewall policy, someone tampers with a router configuration. This could be part of an attack. Your firewall traffic is something you have to track, right? What are the IPs being allowed and denied by your firewall? What is the source? What is the destination? What is the port? What is the protocol? All of these things you have to track, because when you're talking about external attacks, you are going to see a lot of firewall related events as part of the attack. Then you've got system events, right? When an attack happens, you might see things happening on a system. You might see a system being shut down or restarted unexpectedly, or a new process being installed and initiated, or a service being installed, or a software being installed. Then you've got data accesses and modifications. These are again things that you would see in an attack, because a lot of attacks ultimately target your data, and you might have a data exfiltration attempt, right? Someone's trying to steal data, which means they obviously have to touch the data, they have to access it, they have to, try to copy it, they have to maybe they try to delete it, modify it, or so on. Then you want to track administrator actions, right? Because sometimes an administrator might make a change either by mistake or with malicious intent, and you have to make sure that all the changes made by administrators are validated, right? This is, of course, extremely important. This is, of course, very important from the point of view of um, one, yes, a lot of compliance regulations require it, but it's also something that you periodically review to make sure none of the changes made by an administrator leads to a loophole in your security policy. And then, okay, I have to stop somewhere. So I stopped with web server activity. These again are going to be important. If you see web servers, they're your front end facing applications, which means it's what is outside that people can attack, right? So you often see SQL injection attempts and cross-site scripting and various attacks. And you want to track events that are happening on your web server, right? Who is making requests? What are the downloads and uploads happening? Where is the activity coming from? What are the errors, the HTTP status codes that are being triggered, and so on. So all of this put together and more is what you need to track. Essentially, you want to track events that may constitute an attack kill chain so that by tracking these events, you may be able to uncover a much larger attack kill chain. Right? You might see a suspicious change in Active Directory. It could be RON being moved to the domain admins, and you might want to, and that might be part of a much bigger attack. But by detecting that, you're able to then go investigate, right? You can look at your search queries and so on and see what else is happening with Ron's account and get a full picture of the attack. So in short, this is what you have to track. And to track such events, there are two important things you need to do. One is reports and the other is alerts. We look at alerts tomorrow. Let's quickly look at reports as the last thing in today's workshop. So scheduling audit reports is a security best practice, and you want to have audit reports that are tracking the events that I showed in the previous slide and other similar events. So reports are great because they help us visualize things at a single glance. You saw how when I opened the tool and there was a dashboard, you were able to quickly figure out what is going on, at a very high level at least, by just looking at the charts. So reports do the same thing, except they go more deeper and granular to track specific kinds of events. Like you saw in AD Audit Plus, you could go and see very granularly something like what were the recently modified groups in Active Directory. So this is a good practice to have reports scheduled so that they will be generated on a daily basis so that you can do it first thing in the morning. You can review and validate these reports, and in case you see something suspicious, you can have a process to flag those incidents during your review in order for further investigation. So let's quickly look at how that would look like in the tool. So Event Log Analyzer, if you go to the reporting section, we have split the devices based on Windows, Unix, IBM ES400, and individual network equipment vendors. Then you've got applications where we've got SQL, Oracle, IIS, Apache, Terminal, printer servers, DHCP logs, SNMP traps, and so on. Then we've got file integrity monitoring, which, like I said, is now only Linux. Threats, which is only Linux in Event Log Analyzer, right? So you can do Windows file integrity monitoring on AD Audit Plus. Then you've got threats. So these are your Symantec, FireEye, your threat solutions that you may have, vulnerability scanners that you may have, VM management, so your vCenter, ESXi, and any custom reports from other custom applications or legacy systems that you have added. So this is a pretty broad category of reports, and there are over 1,000 pre-built reports in the tool. So for each of these different devices or applications, on the left pane, you can see all of the report categories available for that specific device or application. So in the case of a Windows server, you've got all of these different reports, and you can at a granular level track certain things. So you might want to see specifically what are the removable disk failed reads. You might want to see what are the DOS attacks. You might want to see, who's done changes to your registry values, or you could just be on a higher level overview and say what are the critical events happening on a specific device, on your different devices. So you get these reports out of the box, which means there is no additional configuration required. All of these get automatically populated as the logs are received, and all you have to do is go to the report of interest, click on it, and view the chart and do the review, right? So you can see what are the critical events, in this case, the number of critical events on each of these servers. Now, you can also say that maybe something like this, you want to see how many critical events are coming on your devices every day. You can schedule such a report so that this can be generated and emailed to you on a periodic basis. So it could be on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis. So you can say that on an every for the previous day, show me all the critical events in a PDF format emailed to your email ID, right? So this will be scheduled, so you will get it at that time in your mailbox, right? So that is a best practice, because this is a good way to ensure that you get all important events at your fingertips, so that you can see this and go, oh, okay, maybe something concerns you here, and you can then go and investigate that. And even if this some attack is taking place, we've not even got to alerting, right? But just with reports, even if some attack is taking place and you have a good best practice to do a daily review, you might end up detecting an attack a few hours later as opposed to months later, right? So keep that in mind. That is an important best practice. And with a tool like ours, you get pre-built reports. What we have done is, over the course of several years, we have identified common use cases that every security team might need. So we might have got feature requests from customers saying they want to track these events. So being a product company, we build those features as part of a product, so that anyone else who use the product can also get that same benefit. So a lot of these reports have been carefully curated to track important things that most security teams are concerned about. Same with AD Audit Plus. You get a lot of reports, particularly for Active Directory. I, in fact, noticed a lot of questions coming in, and maybe this is an opportunity for me to clarify. We got a question from Jude asking if what if your identity provider is not Active Directory? What if you're using something else? Unfortunately, we don't support that at this point, but it is actually something in the works, right? So um, my apologies for that if it's not meeting your requirement right now. But I'd still reckon that a lot of the rest of you might be using Active Directory, right? So, and if that's the case, you bring in your domain controller logs into AD Audit Plus, and you will be able to see all of these reports automatically generated, and you can get at a granular level specific changes made to users, groups, computers, OUs, GPOs, and a very granular level of tracking for your logons, account lockouts, and so on. And so it's very robust in terms of its reporting. This has been one of the features that we often get credited for, right? Because we ManageEngine as a company is tries to be as simple as possible in terms of usage and deployment. So a good thing that I would recommend our attendees to do today is look at your tools, either AD Audit Plus or Event Log Analyzer. Go to the reporting section and see what are the details that you can actually get out of the tool out of the box, right? So you can go open up each of these categories, see what are the things that are being tracked. All of this is without any additional configuration. And you can, maybe you realize that you are struggling with pulling out a specific information like an account lockout, for example, and now suddenly you have all of this information at your fingertips, right? So something like account lockout, you are able to see what account lockouts happened. You can get this in real time, and you get the details of what caused the lock. We analyzed various different parameters, right? So various causes of an account lockout, and we would be able to tell you exactly what caused the account lockout, right? Not going to get too deep into the use cases themselves, but I encourage all of you to go into the tool, open up these report categories, and see what is available. Right, that is the best way of understanding what a solution can do for you. And you may be pleasantly surprised that some information that you might have been struggling for in a previous audit is actually available as a neat prepackaged report. So that is about reporting. Um, Tomorrow is when we jump into alerting. Right? Reporting is a great way to review what's already happened in the last 24 hours. You get great visualizations and intuitive information at your fingertips. You get out of the box reports, which is great. Tomorrow we look at getting alerts, right? As soon as an event happens, how do we get notified when an event happens? We'll also touch upon file integrity monitoring, and we'll talk about how do we manage an incident. Once an incident is detected, how do we ensure that the alert that is raised is resolved in a streamlined fashion, right? So that is what we're going to look at in part two. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Um, I've seen a few questions coming in, and our support team has answered some of them. The rest of them, I'm going to answer them on the live chat right now. Do take a moment at the end of this workshop to fill up the feedback, and I hope to see you all tomorrow as well. Same time. If in part two, we're going to be looking at alerting, right? So be sure to join us tomorrow, and let me know now on the live chat if you have any questions, and I can answer them. Thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. So I've been getting a few questions regarding specific devices and how to configure them. Maybe I'll answer one of them, and maybe it ends up answering a few of your questions. So I have a question from Achim Bikar. So thank you for your question. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So your question is, can you provide a link on how to connect a specific device? And Achim is talking about an AS400 machine. So the best way to see that is go to the settings, go to manage devices. Here is where you add all your different devices, and an AS400 comes under the other devices category, and you can choose that right here. You will then be guided, right? So we've tried to make it a intuitive process for adding any device. We can't automatically discover it like we do for, say, a Windows domain device, but we still make it an intuitive way by which you can bring bring in logs from your machines like an IBM AS400. What you can also do is check the help documentation. So on the top right corner, you have a user guide, and you can see here for each device, we give you how to add the device, right? So let me just go to, I think it's a little bit up. Let's see, get started, add devices, right here. So all of these different devices, right? Windows, Syslog, IBM AS400, all of these things are available, right? And we also got a question asking if Linux goes as a system. Right? This is from Jude. again. So yeah, all of that, you get this information right here. You can see for each and every device type, how would you have to do the adding. So you asked for IBM AS400, you can get those details right here and follow these steps to bring your IBM AS400 logs into Event Log Analyzer. Let me see if I can answer maybe one more question, and the rest can be answered by our support team on the chat. Okay, I have a question from Andon. Andon wants to know, is it possible to configure logs to be automatically deleted? Yeah, of course. You can choose. So that would be something you can do in the other parts of the settings. If you go to the admin settings, and then if you're still with us, you can go to the admin settings and you can configure here archives and database retention, right? So you can do two things with when you collect the logs. One is you store them in the database of the product, but that is going to fill up over time. So you move it periodically to a secure archive. So you can choose for how long you want it to be retained in the database right here. Okay, so you can choose that right here, and you can choose, let me just go back to admin settings. You can also choose and create archives, right? So you can create a new archive, and then you'll have the ability to reload archives as and when you need. So you can do both of these things. Not just that, you also have a log forwarder. So as the logs come in, you can automatically forward it to a destination as required. Let me just wait for this to load and I can quickly show you that as well. So you have this option called log forwarder, right? So you can forward the logs as sys logs. I'm afraid I don't have this on the online demo. So my apologies for that, because we're obviously working on a bit of a limited setup since I'm doing this from home. But yeah, you'll be able to do that as well. So you can automatically forward data that is being collected to a destination. You can choose how long you want to retain it. You can do apply log filters so that you can choose what logs get deleted or dropped right away, if that was your question, Andon. You will have that again in admin settings. You've got log collection filters, right? So you can do all of these things. These are all some of the fine tuning that you can do to make sure only the right logs come in, and only it stays in your database for the required amount of time, and it gets into your archives which you specify, right? So it goes to your archive location as well. So yes, all of that is possible with the solution. I hope that answered your question.